Hi guys, it's Kelly Taylor here, and I am back with another video for Trinity Stamps. Today we are going to be using this Wildflower Garden stamp from the newest release. Super love this. I think it's really, really cute. And I'm going to be using the coordinating dies as well. We're going to be talking about blending colored pencils. So if you watch my videos, normally you know alcohol markers are kind of my go-to, but I've been wanting to kind of incorporate more colored pencils lately because I do know that that's pretty common coloring medium for a lot of you. So I have some pencils, I have my sharpener, and then I also have they're, what do we call them? They're like paper stumps, and then the Fantastics are pretty similar as well. Either one of them will work. I also have this little sanding pad. This is how you clean your stumps when you get color on them. So if you want to switch color, you just kind of rub them onto the sandpaper, and there's a bunch of sheets on there. I got mine as part of a kit, but you don't even need this necessarily. You could just use like sandpaper from your local store. You just need something to rub it on that's going to clean off the color. And I do try to shape mine into more of a point as I'm doing it, like I'm turning it, because I feel like that gives me a better opportunity to get into some smaller areas. Here's a couple of ways that we can blend. So we can use baby oil, we can use Gamasol, or we can just use the pencils. Some people are really sensitive to chemicals and things. So the first one we're going to do is the pencils. We have a white pencil here, and basically I'm going to do a layer of color, and then I'm going to do a layer of white. Then I'm going to do my next darkest color and a layer of white. Now, you don't have to do this with the white. You can just blend them doing multiple layers of the same color, but this is a technique that I learned, and it's the one that I use when I'm coloring colored pencils on dark cardstock. So that layer of white helps it kind of pop off. And then this is really just about building up the pigment in the fibers of the paper to get a smooth result. A lot of times when you're using colored pencils, the look that people don't love is that you can still see the texture. Now, sometimes, when you're coloring something, you want to see the texture. So like if you're coloring like an animal, maybe you might want the texture of the paper for like the hairs or the fur. But if you want a smooth result, this is a really good way to do it, which is just the pencils and adding nothing else. These other two, we're going to do the same thing. So we're putting down the lightest color, then we're putting down that mid-tone blue, then we'll put down the darkest blue. So then we're going to work in reverse. You do need to have pigment down in order for this to work, for the blending to work. You need to have enough pigment down for the whichever medium you're using, whether it's the Gamasol or the baby oil. There's somebody else I know that had used orange oil as well. And so basically, I'm just going to pick up a little bit of the Gamasol. You just tap it onto the nib, and then you can just rub it on there and pull the color through. It does make the color a little bit more vibrant, and also it smooths it out. So it fills in all of the texture of the paper, and then you can see there's plenty of leftover. So if you really wanted to go from dark to light, you could continue on past the section that you colored. For the baby oil, it doesn't continue on quite. It does blend them. You'll see that here. It does blend them, but it doesn't carry the color quite as far as the Gamasol. So you'll see once I start to get kind of to the edge, it's just not as, it doesn't carry as much over. Like here when I'm scribbling it off, see how much less pigment is there? But any of these will work to give you a really smooth blend for your colored pencils. For my card today, I'm going to be using the Gamsol. That's what I learned with, and so that's what I'm using. I was a little unsure about what kind of ink to stamp in, so I tried Gina K's Amalgam ink. I tried Hero Arts Intense Black. I tried Hero Arts Pitch Black, and I tried Picket Fence Studios. The Gamasol didn't smear any of them. The baby oil did smear, I think, the Hero Arts one up at the top. So here is our image stamped out, and then we're going to go in and just do our coloring. You may want to make sure when you're working with colored pencils that you do have very sharp pencils. It seems silly, because they'll still color if they're blunt. And that's true, they will, but it does make it much more difficult to get into smaller areas. So looking at some of these like stems or that rose kind of on the right-hand side where there's smaller areas, if you don't have a sharp tip to get into those, you may end up getting color where you don't want it. So for me, like when I'm working with colored pencils, you'll see that for the most part, I hold my hand kind of back on the pencil. For a really, really long time, I had a hard time coloring with colored pencils because my hand would hurt. Like I was literally gripping the thing for dear life. And it's because I wanted to put down a lot of pressure. And if you find that you're doing that when you're coloring and your hand hurts, back it up on the pencil, because you cannot, it's impossible to put down that much pressure when your hand is that far back. And it's still something that I have to practice to this day. But colored pencils is all about building up layers of color, filling in the fibers of those paper, and just, layering them on top of each other. Now, the Gamasol or the baby oil, those are going to help blend them together and give you a smoother result, so you don't see that texture. And like I said, it does make it a little bit more vibrant, but you have to have pigment down in order for it to move. Something like this, I do have a harder time getting as much dimension as I would with my Copic markers. But I think that's just because I don't want to say user error, because I don't think we're doing anything wrong. But I think I'm just not as well versed in colored pencils as I am in Copic markers. And, we're always learning new things, me, you, all of us. So sometimes it's good to kind of practice with another medium and see what it is that you like and what you are able to achieve. But you can see I'm going back and forth, like lightest color, darkest color, and just layering those up to try to make sure that I do have some dimension before I even bring in the Gamasol to kind of smooth it all out. I just want to make sure that I have enough pigment down that it's not going to, that it is going to be vibrant. So I'm showing you this one in kind of regular time, but I am going to speed it up because I'm really slow with colored pencils. And I think when you're a person who maybe colored pencils are your medium, you're probably a lot faster. Or if watercolor is your medium, you're fastest at that. This is a new to me medium, not new to me, but it's not my go-to. And so I am a little bit slower when it comes to coloring them. Also, I do want to note that you don't have to use any of these. Like, you could just color them with the colored pencil, and if you're happy with the way that they look, then that's great. You don't need to use anything to blend them. This is just another couple of options that you can use if you are looking for a way to kind of blend them a little bit more. And you do have to, go back and kind of like almost refill your blending stump, because you will use what is on the stump, and then it will run out. So it's almost like refilling your little your little pen, like back in the old days, how like you would have to keep dipping your quill into the ink. It's kind of like the same concept where you have to go back and dip it in to make sure that you have enough. So I went with just kind of a variety of colors. There isn't, they're wildflowers, and this is super cute, and I love that it's a big enough image to carry the whole card. But you can color them whatever color, makes your heart happy. You can also, like, you can see what I'm doing here. If after you've blended it out, you decide that you want to add more pigment or more shadows, in the, like, kind of like the sunflower, I went in and like added some dots for some texture. You can go back over it after you have blended it out, and add more layers. So just because you've gone over it with the Gamma or baby oil or whatever, you can still go back in. You're not stuck forever. Like, you're not married to it. So here is where we are kind of speeding things up because I'm not fast. I'm not fast about it. And I chose to do, like I said, with the flowers, I just chose a bunch of different colors, but I only chose to do 2 greens. So I did more of like a yellow green and then more of like a bright tealish color. Originally, my game plan, and it's so funny, you know what I mean, how like you have an idea in your head for how your card is going to go when you first sit down, or at least most of us do. And that is not that's not how it went. I originally was going to, die cut it out. I was going to put it on kind of like a gray background and have the a white sentiment at the bottom for it to sit on, so that way it didn't look like it was floating. And then, we'd have a neutral background and all these brightly colored flowers. But as you could tell, if you saw the thumbnail when we first started here, we ended up not with gray. That is for sure. So here, this is like these smaller areas is where it's really important to have, kind of like those sharp tips for your colored pencils. And then I usually use a couple of different blending stumps. And the Fantastics work as well, and they have the caps on them, which is really nice. They have why can't I think of the word? They have like a rounded, like a bullet nib, but then they also have like a pointed one, like a pointed edge one. And those work nicely. So if this is something you want to do a lot and you don't want to have to keep cleaning your nibs, then, you could just put your caps on those and just keep those for, whenever you're doing this. I have a tendency to work with probably like 2 or 3 of the stumps, and I rarely, this is just me being lazy, like real talk. So like I colored all my yellow first, and then once my yellow was done, then I used that same nib for my orange instead of having to clean it off. And then these will just stay like this until the next time I go to do this. Here with the greens, I ended up having to go back over them a couple of times. The yellow greens were just a little bit too light, and so I wasn't necessarily loving those. The teals were really bright, which I loved. I loved that bright teal with that like hot pink color. And then there's like 3 little leaf clusters that are all the same. And for those, I did a combination of the yellow green and then the lightest teal color. After they're all done, I'm going to go back in with like my darker pencils and really kind of like bolster up any of the shadows. So that way I'm happy with the amount of dimension that I have. And these I'm not going to blend out. I'm just going to put those kind of darkest shadows in, and then I'm just going to leave them as is. So that's something else that you can do if you find that you're not happy with the amount of dimension that you're achieving. So now that the coloring is done, I really liked there's like 2 little butterflies and a bee that's also in this set. And so I decided that I was going to stamp those as well. And then here's my sentiment. Remember, my original game plan was my sentiment to go underneath in white. And so as of right now, like that's still the game plan. That's not what ended up happening, but so I'm stamping those down. I'm not going to show you the coloring of the butterflies because it is the same exact thing we just did. I am going to cut all of these out. They all have coordinating dies, and then we can start going in and building the card. I really do. I think that this wildflower set is super cute. Like when the new release came out, I had a hard time choosing between this one and the Better Than an Email because I liked them both. So here, I chose to put it on blue, but I don't love the white background. So here's how I color match to see what's going to work. I just take a piece of scrap paper, I put it right up next to my cardstock, and then there was 1 or 2 that were really close, but they weren't perfect. And so here what you see me doing is I'm putting down 2 of the colors, and then I'm layering them over top. So that I can figure out which one is going to be a perfect match. And I did end up finding one that was pretty much spot on. And then I colored in the entire background as well as the butterflies. Now I'm going to have to go in with color number 2 because the first color is too light. But I'm going to go in with color number 2 and do it again. Did I have regrets? Almost immediately. I'm going to be honest, because it's a lot of coloring around objects, because there's so much going on in this little wildflower garden. But you can see how it just kind of disappears into the card. And so it was well worth it, even though at the time I was like, you're crazy coloring around all of these little flowers. In the future, if you wanted to do something like this, you could stamp the flowers onto this blue cardstock, and then you could use that kind of white, the white trick to, color your colored pencils over darker cardstock. So now we have that white at the bottom. We're laying it up there. I have a white border. And I'm like, do I like it? Do I not like it? So I decided to roll with it. I'm using some foam tape to pop it up off the background just to give it a little bit more interest because there's not a lot going on this card, guys. It's a really clean and simple one. So I went ahead and popped that up. I also popped up my 2 little butterflies. I did adhere my flowers a little bit lower on the card so that I would have room for my butterflies at the top. And almost instantly, I'm just being honest with you guys, almost instantly I was like, I do not like that white. I do not like that white. It just didn't, everything was blue. It just didn't seem to go. So I did end up stamping the sentiment onto some blue cardstock and white heat embossing it. I also added, I believe these are they Moonstone? I'll link them. But so this just kind of gives, I added shine, a little kind of magical feel, to what is happening around our little wildflower garden. I'm going to add some shimmers and this whole time, this white is bothering me. My usual white gel pen, there wasn't too, like, it wasn't too crazy. I added some highlights to some of the flower petals, and then here is the sentiment. So again, that was stamped in white pigment ink. It was heat embossed with white detail embossing powder, and then die cut. It is the same exact one, and I am going to just pop it right over the other one, and that made me so much happier. I liked it so much better. So I hope that this gave you some insight into how to blend your colored pencils if it's something you're struggling with. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I always appreciate your time, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.